episode number 189 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. Have you ever felt like you were red-pilled once you got on your fertility journey, and what you see now you cannot unsee? And do you ever find that that is really overwhelming? If that's the case, this is the episode for you. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. Today I wanted to talk about getting the fertility red pill. And what I mean by that is, if you think about the movie Matrix, which probably most of you guys have seen, many people might remember the moment that Morpheus gives Neo an option of either taking the blue pill and continuing to stay in the dream, or taking the red pill and awakening to the truth. And a lot of that is very similar to the fertility journey when people go through challenges trying to conceive, and then they decide to speak to people and really start to uncover what's going on with their bodies, and uncover with diagnosis and start to see different practitioners. A lot of times it's a team. They go to regular Western doctors, or they go to Eastern medicine, or naturopaths, or nutritionists. I mean, really, it's a whole range. And a lot of times it's a combination of all of that, or even just reading books and really tuning in with your own body as to what is going on, what can be done. And the reason I use this analogy is because when I actually went to school, I also had menstrual issues. And when I went to school for Ayurveda, I consider that to be like my first initial red pill, because after learning so many things about trans fats and chemicals and what it means to eat processed foods, I felt like I was red-pilled, and in some senses, I felt a lot more blissful before I knew all this information. And once I knew the information, or the truth really of what these products and these chemicals are really causing to my body, and the issues of imbalances that I probably have had because of this, it was like a red pill. It was very uncomfortable, and I felt like now that I knew this, I couldn't not say it to the people around me. So for even an example of like people putting their phones on their belly or their breasts, and I've seen really horrible stories about that actually, because it's not great for your body. It even has a warning when you first buy a device to not put it right on your body. And so when you understand all of these things, and I consider myself somebody who has been red-pilled, then you're not going to be always so popular amongst your friends or people that you say these things to. I for sure am not so popular around my kids many times, because I have to remind them a lot about these things, the food coloring and everything. And it is now an uphill battle, because unfortunately what's mainstream is not necessarily good for us. And I think that human perception is that if something's common, it's normal. And we often interchange that. So if it's something that, because it's a human need to belong, so when we see that everybody else is doing it, it seems more normal for us. It seems more safe. However, it's important now more than any time to really keep your eyes open and be aware that that's not necessarily the case. In fact, you may actually discover that once you learn all these new things and what causes imbalances in the hormones and what can cause issues with fertility, really, like once you uncover all these things, you might realize that a lot of people don't realize this information. And they don't realize what goes into food that you can buy just in normal processed food at restaurants and so on. So once you do get red pilled, it's a very uncomfortable feeling, because it could be very overwhelming. And you might realize, oh my God, like all my products basically in my house are not good for my fertility, and the food that I've been eating is horrible. And it could be really, really overwhelming. And then it can also cause another issue, another side effect, which is another stressor to be perfect and to have everything on the list done right, and to avoid, because there's nothing more motivating than wanting to have a child and going through these hoops. You'll do anything. As you know, you'll do anything. I know because I work with fertility patients all the time, and I know that they'll do anything. They're the most compliant patients anybody can ask for. So, in a sense, it makes it easy for me. On the other hand, it's important to have a fine balance, because sometimes it can go the other direction and it can be very, very stressful for people once they do find out all the things that they need to do. So, being on top of the supplements, being on top of the food, being on top of the lifestyle, being on top of the exercise, being on top of the chemicals, it's a lot. So, I want to just mention a couple of things that I suggest if you are feeling overwhelmed, if you do feel like you've swallowed that red pill and all of a sudden everything's apparent to you and you're starting to realize all this stuff all at once. Now, when you do make changes, it just does not work. And this is like the first truth, is it doesn't work to take something all in at once. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work behaviorally. It doesn't work in your own ability to mentally digest and also bring it into your life in a way that is everlasting. It just doesn't work. So it's really important, even though it's tempting to do everything at once, to take it step by step and one step at a time, because it needs to be a realistic task. It cannot be overwhelming, and it cannot give you another side effect or another problem in so implementing it. So once you're implementing one thing and then you're feeling super stressed, and that's going to spike your cortisol, and then it's going to cause all kinds of other problems. So we don't want to do that. We want to do things with ease, and that's what I find is the most natural way to implement any habit. And what I mean by natural is that we are nature. Let's not forget. I know we're very attuned to our devices and we know how our devices work. And sometimes we expect from our bodies the same thing that we've been conditioned to expect from technology. And our bodies are not man-made technology. Our bodies work in the rhythms of nature. And that's just an absolute truth. That's a truth that's never going to change. We are nature. We're not going to turn into machines. We never are going to. Our bodies are working within the confines of the laws of nature, and that's a good thing. We don't want something to happen too fast. So sometimes with behaviors or implementing new changes in our life, it needs to be done in a way that is natural, a natural rhythm. So the first thing that I suggest is to definitely take things step by step. So think about the worst thing or the worst habit that you really need to change right away. Like, what's the one thing? And start out with that, literally. It could be very, very gradual. And you can do one thing a day where you're actually like realizing what it is and becoming aware and thinking about how you can implement it. Now, there could be a couple of things, a number of things you can do if you want, like changing, maybe increasing your exercise a little bit more, and also implementing or removing something from your diet, but really taking it step by step. So what's the one worst thing that you're doing right now that you've learned about? And it could be like eating sugar. And what are the steps that you can take to change that? So an example of how you can ease into not eating as much sugar is by taking something that's processed sugar, processed sweets, and starting to have instead something that's naturally sweet. So you can add raw honey, or you can create yourself like chia seed pudding or have berries and add, or even dates, and I say not too much because even natural sugars are, you can go overboard and have too much, but you could do something else instead. So you'll still get the sweetness, you'll still get something and kind of get that sweet tooth need, and you can start out with more and then gradually go down from that. So more natural is better than unnatural, but too much natural is not great either. But if you're changing it and you're trying to graduate from taking processed sugary foods to more natural fruits and sugar, then go to the more natural sugar. And if you need to, have more in the beginning until you can gradually move into less. And that is what I suggest. The mind does, and I say the mind because it's all behavioral, does not like things to be too drastic and too much of a change. What's going to happen is it's going to work very much like a rubber band. It's going to snap right back to where it was. And that habit is just not going to change. Your mind's going to resist you too much. So you don't want to fight with your mind. You don't want to fight with your subconscious mind, your habits. So you ease yourself. And another thing that you can do is you can anchor a new habit to an old habit. So if you want to, say, start breathing exercises, this is something that I actually suggest for a lot of my patients. Breathing exercises, it sounds like so simple, but it actually really increases your vitality, your life force vitality in your body. And it's something that I think just doing every day for a few minutes is incredible. But the problem is people forget, or they just don't want to, like they don't add it into their daily routine. So I always suggest anchor a new habit to an old habit. So if you know that every single day in the morning you're going to brush your teeth and you're going to have a tea or a coffee or hot water with lemon or whatever it is that you usually do in the beginning of the day, everybody has something. They eat breakfast or something. And if you don't, that's not a great habit. It's really important to start off your day with some kind of ritual. And whatever that ritual is, you can easily add 2 minutes to that ritual and do breathing exercises. I also say even 2 minutes of meditation. And literally under 5 minutes, you just added breathing exercises and 2 minutes of meditation. Why do I say 2 minutes? Because that is a really doable thing. And once you do that every single day, you will eventually come to want it more. And you will increase it more naturally to a longer period of time because your mind's going to start to say, okay, this is interesting, this is comfortable, this actually feels pretty good. It makes me feel more clear throughout the day, this feels good. So that's why I always say 2 minutes, because 2 minutes is doable and it's also going to get you to doing something repeatedly without really breaking your day up too much. So it's not like you're changing it completely. You're tacking on 2 minutes to something that you're already doing every single day. So you're anchoring a new habit to an old habit, and that will help you adopt this new habit much more easily without really fighting your mind. And ultimately, there are so many ways to do things that are easy. It's not like you're doing something to resist yourself. When you resist yourself, you're setting yourself up for it not working. So it's a strategy. When you start to understand how your mind works and what you tend to resist, it's all about designing it in a way that you will absorb it. So I always like to give an example of, and I say this actually more with getting sunlight in the morning. The reason is because in the morning it's much more easy for you to absorb it because it's not too overwhelming like during the midday. And I always compare it, and it's kind of similar to habits too, but I always compare it to drinking from a hose. Not that you're going to drink from a hose, but drinking from a hose. When you're drinking from a hose, you're not going to make it shoot out really strong. You're going to have it kind of trickle so that it's easy to drink. It's not too overwhelming. But if you really amp it up and make it too strong, what's going to happen is you're probably going to choke. You're not going to be able to drink anything, and it's going to be very uncomfortable, and you're not going to want to do it again. And the same thing goes for getting sunlight in the morning versus sunlight in the afternoon. You're going to get a lot more when it's mild, when it's easy, and it's not too strong. Same thing with implementing new habits. If it's too much, too fast, it's probably not going to stick. It's probably not going to be compatible with your mind adopting it. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing is give yourself some slack. So don't be too hard on yourself. Don't expect perfection. If you make a mistake, just say oops and go back to what you were doing. It's okay not to do it for a couple of days. What happens is the drama that we bring to it, the meaning that we bring to it, actually sets us back, because what we do is a lot of times is we can get very hard on ourselves for not completing a task or not doing something or not adding something. And what we do by doing that is, without realizing it, we start to identify as a certain type of person. Oh, I can never do this. This isn't really something easy for me, or whatever conclusion that can come from it, whether it's not easy or I'm not good at this. These are beliefs that we implement around it that could very easily happen when we don't complete certain tasks. And it's a behavioral thing. It is something that a lot of people do without even realizing it. And when we do that, it's a self-fulfilled prophecy where we're actually making it so that we will not move forward. So the best thing to do when you don't do what you expected from yourself is just say, oops, let me just do this again. And that's honestly one of the best things that I've personally implemented in my life. It's made things a lot easier. It's just to have some grace towards yourself and allow yourself to have your moments where it just doesn't work out. Or if you go out and you have dessert once in a while, okay, no big deal. It happened. Allow yourself that joy. And I think that when you do actually allow yourself that joy, you're going to be more likely to continue on the new path and new behaviors and new habits, because it's not going to feel like a chore. It's not going to feel like this horrible punishment when you don't. And then what happens is you just don't want to feel that way anymore. So then you just kind of go back to your old behaviors because you associate this new behavior with this just uncomfortable feeling. So you're like, you know what, this is just not for me and I'm just not going to do it. And you move on. And those are definitely a couple of tips to just ease into new behaviors so that you are able to comfortably swallow the red pill of fertility. And I do want to acknowledge it because it is a thing. You're going to realize as you're going through the journey, you're going to uncover a lot of what's going on, and some of it is not going to be very pleasant. But it's all really, anything that has to do with awareness and uncovering is all really for your beneficial outcome in one way or the other. So eventually it's really going to help you grow as a person, but sometimes growth could be a little uncomfortable when we start to realize that things are not quite what they need to be, or something needs to change. We don't like change. That's just a human nature. It really is how our brains are designed. They don't love change. It's not comfortable. But a lot of times change is where the growth happens. And sometimes we're just going to have to push through that discomfort. But it doesn't have to be in a way that's very punishing, which is often how people feel. And if you do work with somebody and they make you feel overwhelmed, that might not be the person for you. I invite you to find somebody that works with you in a way that feels good and feels aligned, because ultimately that's the kind of synergy you want with the person you're working with. so that you don't feel this horrible, overwhelmed feeling, but you're still, and you may still feel discomfort, but it's not in a way that's too overwhelming. It's in a way that you're able to digest. So I hope these tips helped you, or at least made it more easy to swallow that fertility red pill. And thank you for joining me today, and I hope you have a beautiful day. So that concludes today's episode. You can find all of the links mentioned on the episode notes. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to share and leave a review. Reviews mean everything to podcasters, and I really enjoy hearing from my listeners. You can also find me on my website at www.thewholesomelotus.com or email me at info@thewholesomelotus.com. I love hearing from my listeners. If you're interested and want updates as well as a free ebook on my top 10 fertility boosting habits, you can visit my fertility page on www.thewholesomelotus.com. I thank you so much for listening in and hope that you have a beautiful day.